SAS demonstration, missing value codes. The data set we are going to be using for the unit on formatting and recoding variables is called OWN. The OWN data comes from a study of the nutritional status of 1,006 preschool children that was conducted at the University of Michigan by a researcher named Owen and others in the 1970s. Information was collected about the family and children. The data are in a raw file called owen.dat, and the variables are separated by spaces. So here we are creating a temporary data set called OWN, and we're bringing in the data owen.dat. Some of the variables that are being read in, family num, which is the ID variable, child num, which is the position that the child has in the family. We read in age, which is in months, gender, race, W rank, which is socioeconomic status, income C, which is an income per capita, and then we are reading in several different nutritional variables. Now the interesting thing about this data set is that missing value codes such as 99 and 999 were used when a variable such as age for that subject was missing. So let's run the data set and just do proc means on all the variables in the data set. Notice that we have 1,006 observations, and then if we go over to the column under maximum, we see that some of these maximums are 999. And so that's going to be kind of kooky if we're looking at variables such as height, weight, mother's age. Obviously there's something going on here, and these are not going to be appropriate statistics. So these means are being affected by these missing value codes of 999 and 99. So we're going to need to do something to fix that so that the descriptive statistics are appropriate for this data set. So we are going to use if-then statements to convert these missing values to missing. So basically, what we're saying here, we're using an if-then statement. If vitamin A equals 99, then we're going to set it to missing. If head circumference equals 99, then we're going to set head circumference equal to missing. So basically what we're doing here is we're taking all of these variables and setting them equal to missing if they have a missing value code such as 99 or 999. Now, if you were working with your own data, you normally have some kind of code sheet. And on the code sheet, it will let you know whether missings were left as blanks or periods, or whether missings were some kind of code like 99999. And so based on your code sheet, you'll know whether you need to replace these missing values with periods using if-then statements. So now let's take a look at what our means look like now that we have replaced all of the 99s and 999s with SAS missing value codes. So notice here in our new output for proc means, not all of the variables actually have full observations, 1,006 observations for each variable. The N in the proc means procedure tells you the number of non-missing observations. So for child num or fam num, the ID or age or gender, every subject in the data set had something recorded. But notice for some of the variables like mother's age or vitamin A, not every subject had vitamin A recorded, now that we've replaced the 99s and 999s with a missing value code. But if we go across, we see that now our statistics make a lot more sense. So we look at these maximum values and the minimum values, and they seem appropriate for the variables that we have read in. So again, that's why it's so important that you run these kinds of descriptive statistics on your data and look at it to make sure that the way that the data was entered makes sense. Let's say that you wanted to create a complete data set. So you only want subjects in the data set that have variables that are non-missing for every single variable. So you only want observations that have complete data on every variable. I'm going to introduce a function here, and this is the nmiss function. And what it does is it returns the number of missing values in a list of variables. So we are listing the variables fam num all the way to f height. And basically these two hyphens together are saying let's include all the variables that were read in from the first variable to the last variable. And if none of these variables is missing, then it's going to be equal to 0. So if you have complete data on every one of these variables, then when you do this nmiss function, it's going to take on a value of 0. And so what we're telling SAS is that we only want to keep observations where if you did the function nmiss on all the variables for that particular observation, it would return the value of 0. And that way, only those observations which have complete data are going to be kept in the data set data complete. So let's take a look at what happens when we run this code. And see here, there are 702 observations out of our 1006 original observations that were read in that have complete data on every single variable. Only 702 have complete data. Some of the observations that were read in have incomplete data, where some of the variables were not entered for the data set. How do we deal with missing values for character variables? So here we're going to read in a simple, small data set, name, which is a character, gender, which is a character, age, and city. And notice that here in this case, for a couple of the observations we've read in that the observations are missing on some of these variables. So for Cindy, the second observation, city was entered UNK for unknown. For Alice, gender was entered as NA for not answered. So let's take a look at this data and what happens if we do a proc print as well as a frequency of gender. So notice here that when we print out our data set, the missing values are still in the data set. So we see here that it looks as if for Cindy, her city is UNK. For Bob, his city is UNK. So it's left in the data set, the actual word that was entered. Again, for Alice, gender was entered as NA. If we scroll down and look at the frequency of gender, we see that there's one female in our data set, two males in our data set, and then there's a variable NA in our data set as a coding for gender. So again, we're going to want to take care of these missing values that are character strings. So we're going to set up our missing value codes with if-then statements. So here we're saying that if sex equals NA, and notice I put it in double quotes, then we're going to set sex equal to missing. So with a character string, the way we set sex equal to missing is just having the double quotes right next to each other. We could do the same thing with single quotes. So here we're saying that if city equals UNK or unknown, then city equals just two single quotes. So we're setting city equal to missing. So now let's see what our data set looks like when we just run the code where we've replaced these character variables with missing. So now notice that in the printout, we have missing values are set to blank. So for city, for Cindy and Bob, it's just left missing or blank. For Alice, gender is left blank. And when we do a frequency of gender, we see that we have one female, two males, and then for one observation, gender is missing. Let's say that we wanted to have in our frequency distribution to include the missing values in the calculation of the percentages. We can do this by adding the option missing to our proc freq. So here we're doing a frequency distribution of gender where we want missing included in the calculation of percentages. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So notice here we have one observation where gender was not entered, and that was 25% of our data set. We have female 1 and male 2. If we just scroll up, here we see the situation where just those who actually had gender entered had a percentage calculated. And so the missing subject, the subject who was missing gender, was left out of the calculation of the percentages. So this ends the demonstration on how we use if-then statements to recode missing values.